What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Nolan TCG, and it's been a little while since we've done that deck profile intro, but we are back with a deck profile here for DDDs. So I was gonna deck profile this after YCS, but ultimately with DDDs ended up top 4ing. So I kind of figured no point doing my profile, given that it didn't even do that well. So I thought I'd hold off on it, but ultimately ended up winning OTS champs with this list. Then proceeded to win locals again as a follow-up. But yeah, pretty much post YCS, I think I've lost one game with this list. It's a really, really good list. I quite like the list that I'm playing here. It's cut down to 40. It does look very similar to the top 4 list from YCS. I will give that credit. However, I was just playing the same kind of list. It's going to seem pretty awkward when we get to a 2 of Imperm, and it seems hard to explain. But ultimately, this is the list that I played for YCS with 3 cards changed in the side deck for OTS champs. Ended up going, XO on that, winning that, and then, like I mentioned, winning locals again. Dice rolls are probably my biggest challenge here. I think in the past, well, including YCS and both OTS champs and the most previous locals, I've won 4 die rolls in all the tournaments combined. So it was 2 at YCS and then 1 apiece at each of the other tournaments. But it just kind of goes to show the power of the deck. But we'll get into a profile for this one. Of course, no sponsor because we don't do that anymore. So jumping into the profile, pretty standard. We've got 3 copies of Doom Queen Markinex to start off. 1 card combo, plays around droll, all of the good things. The amount of times that you get drolled in this deck and you just kind of look at your opponent and you're just like, I don't think they know that I was just going to be searching extenders. Which is always cute. Like, of course, the 3 Kepler, normal summon Kepler with no other card in hand does still lose to droll. But of, I think, that's the 13 1-card combos or 1.5 card combos that you play, I think it's 12 1-card combos and then 1.5 card combo. This is the only one that hard loses to droll. So do keep that in mind if you do want to build the list. If you have a way to do another option, especially in games 2 and 3, I would do the other option first before normal summoning the Kepler, simply because your opponent's going to put in droll. It doesn't stop the deck unless you play into it, so just play smart. A lot of people will tell you this deck is very, very complicated. It is nowhere near as complicated as it used to be. The addition of Doom Queen Markinex and the new continuous spell make this deck so much more linear. Even the new XEs and the new Synchro and, of course, the new Tuner do refine this deck out a whole lot. The combos are not very difficult to learn. It's all available in Master Duel. Would very much recommend picking up the deck and just giving it a go. It's not very expensive. It's quite good, like I mentioned, and yeah, well worth your time. After your 6 1-card monster starters, we do play a couple of extenders. These let you play through additional hand traps. So we've got 2 copies of Scale Surveyor and 3 copies of DD Griffin. Preferably, if you get stuck, Scale Surveyor is always going to be a high scale in the pen zone. Do note as well, like whenever it goes to grave or goes to extra deck, you can bounce a pen scale back, which does open up your zones if you need to do a bit of recycling there. Griffin, of course, so much utility comes from this card, whether it's coming from grave, whether or not you're pendulum summoning, or whether or not it's just a card in hand. It just gives you so much advantage. This card is really, really good. Then we get into our one-ofs. This is probably your 1.5 card combo for the deck is DD Count Surveyor. It plus a discard outlet is full combo because it adds 1 with 0 attack or defense. Spoilers, that's your Doom Queen Markinex, and then off to the races you go. If you get drolled on the out of the Doom Queen Markinex, guess what? You can still just keep playing. Then we get into our other one-ofs, probably the 2 bricks next, which is your Necro Slime and your Lancer Soldier. Of course, good old Necro Slime works for the fusions. Lancer Soldier is your Synchro line. Typically, this is the card you're always going to be foolish barreling off the Copernicus. So Copernicus dump, this pop your back row, summon back, become a level 4, overlay for King Solomon. Full combo kind of stems out from there. Your Solomon's always going to search your extender in the Griffin, and then you just keep playing. And then to round out our DD lines, we've got the Oblivion King Abyss Ragnarok. Solely here is you can extend from grave, you can extend ones on the board. It did come up in the finals at the most recent locals that you can do the tribute another DD to target a monster you control and banish it. Really cute line, just good for getting rid of that last pesky monster. And then this card for the longest time seemed cuttable, DD Orthos. This card is now so important for this deck whenever it goes first. not for the reasons you'd think. If you know the deck and you're here to look for advice, there is a card in the side deck. Spoilers is the reason why this card is so good going first. But ultimately, it gets you into your synchro plays as well. So your opponent will typically bestial the Lancer Soldier because this card used to be a card that not everyone played. So you'll see the bestial come down, hitting the DD Lancer Soldier, or they'll get belled, or it'll have just your opponent will always use the Graveyard Hate on the Lancer Soldier. And then just being able to get access to the Orthos is great. You can activate it from deck with the Link 2, then use the Link 3 to pop it, and then you can then recycle your Doom Queen Market X to summon itself, pop, and then get back into the scales, and that resets your scales, and you've got the level 4 tuner that is sitting in your extra deck for that second Pendulum summon, which, yeah, again, really, really good. Very much would recommend this card. It is no longer a cuttable card in my opinion. Next off, we get into the Hand Trap line. Hand Trap line for this deck, well, you can fit probably about, I'm going to say 15 extra cards of space. Count it out as we go, but we've got 8 cards for your pure monster hand traps. 3 copies of Lunchami for Walos, of course it's a given. 3 copies of Ash, always going to be a given. Then I'm on 2 copies of Droll. It come up a lot. You play so many hand traps that Droll plus another hand trap is always going to pretty much end most decks' turns. I didn't give this card as much credit as I should have going into the branded Draco Tail matchup. This card's actually quite good. Yeah, it can't complain. Also, being able to self-droll. This deck does lose quite hard to a Furwalos itself, so having 5 ways to stop the Furwalos, really, really good. Again, like I mentioned, this deck plays quite well under Droll, so you give your opponent the draw, and then you Droll. Doesn't matter that you locked yourself. You do, of course, have to be worried if your opponent has follow-up hand traps after that, because that's what's always going to wreck your day. But being able to self-droll, giving you 5 ways to play around the Furwalos is important. Spoilers, we do have a Call by the Grave later on that does help you play around it. Getting into our spells, more 1-card combos, 3 copies of Dark Contract with a Gate. Always use it to add the Markinex unless your hand says otherwise. This card hits so many negates, and so many times you open up the Extender and it doesn't matter. Then for our probably 1 card, which is really, really good, but not a 1-card combo, of course, is our Dark Contract with the Zero King. If you're playing against this deck, this is the card you Ash or you Impulse. This is the card you want to stop. It's a choke point. Spoilers. Next off, we get into, I guess, the rest of our combo pieces. So we've got another 1-card combo in Nightmare Throne. This card does lose to Droll and Lockbird, so be careful. We've got 1 copy of Dark Spirit's Mastery. This card doesn't lose to Droll and Lockbird, so you can be less careful. Probably the biggest differentiator between my list and the list from top 4 in the main deck sense. I'm not playing the 3 of extra Perulia, and I've switched 1 Dark Spirit Mastery for a 1-for-1. Yes, the logic is always there that if you draw 2 Dark Spirit Mastery, you can just Dark Spirit Mastery, discard the other one. But then that also doesn't play into the fact that sometimes you draw a Furwalos. So 1-for-1 is my second option. It does play quite poorly into Droll, which is something to be aware of. But again, reading the hand and knowing your situations is always going to be important, because you don't necessarily always need to have that search be so critical. And then we get into just some cards for when you get hand trapped, because you're going to get hand trapped. 1 Talents and 1 Call by the Grave. And then to round out the main deck, we do have our trap lineup. This is an Impulse deck. Yes, you are playing Winds. No, it doesn't conflict, because nowhere in the world are you ever going to Impulse before you're Drolling. So yeah, just consider that. We've got 2 copies of Infinite Impermanence, and then 1 copy of Dark Contract with the Eternal Darkness rounds out the main deck. The 2 Imperm were in here as a last-second cut. I actually cut down on combo pieces because mathematically I felt as though the amount of starters I had was now correct, and I felt like increasing the hand trap line was more critical. Given we're an Impulse deck, Impermanence was the card I wanted to put in, and that was the correct decision in my opinion. Getting into the extra deck, starting off with Xyz, we've got the new Xyz, Wise King Solomon. Excellent card, searches your extender. The Banished from Grave effect is also really, really good for going for game. Definitely something to remember with this card. The other rank 4, look, there's, again, like the other cards in the main deck, there was a time when I would have said this is one of the more cuttable cards in the deck. But in retrospect, honestly, it's quite a good card. It deserves to be here for a reason. It helps you. The only time I would say this is cuttable if you're going second. Going second, this card is not fantastic. Like, you do get the soul charge back, but it's end of battle phase. It's already too late 9 times out of 10. Then last off for, I guess, the rank 4 line. Yes, this is rank 5, but you typically just slap it on top of the Wise King Solomon as your King Tell. Non-once per turn Foolish, always going to be good. For our rank 6, we play Caesar. Do be aware if you're playing this deck that this does give an attack buff. That doesn't come up in other lists because it has to target another DD. However, in DDDs, guess what? This can actually use both effects, which is always cool. Also searches for a Dark Contract if your opponent outs it. So if your whole board gets broken, do remember when this hits grave, it searches another Dark Contract so you can get started again on the next turn. We are on 2 copies of Zeus King Markinex. Again, there's so many times I would be like, this is a cuttable card, and then it comes up. So 2, I think, is correct. For the synchros, we've got 1 Clovis, 1 Siegfried. Again, do remember Clovis has a banish effect. It is a reborn from grave or banished, but when it is banished, do make sure you're using that effect because it facilitates games so often. For our fusions, we've got 1 Genghis and 1 copy of Divine Sage King. This makes the combos so much more simple. If you were playing this deck prior to the most recent set and thought it wasn't good enough, give it another shot. Pick up this common. The fact this is a common is actually pretty absurd. But this just free summons your Genghis, and then you can then do some cute little plays that then facilitate your Genghis and your Ragnarok, and you can flood everything back to the board. And then last for the fusions, we have the Dimensional King Arc Crisis. This is just game. No one really knows that this card exists. They think that they've completely shut you down. You use everything you can to try and force their board going second, and then you just go, game. This touches board, game over. Thank you very much. And then last off, we've got our links. We've got 2 copies of Gilgamesh. It's all you really need now because you shuffle 1 back with the Sage King during the combo. 1 copy of Zeus King Ragnarok. Again, all you really need. The negate from hand on this is really cute. Do remember this banishes for cost, which does come up combined with the Sage King and the Caesar. So Caesar detaches for cost, so you can detach the Sage King, Ragnarok negate, banishing the Sage King. Sage King can then trigger, I'm fairly sure. If I'm wrong there, do feel free to call me out below. But that's then if you get the Dark Contract with the Eternal Darkness. If that gets removed from your board, that's a way you can get it back. And then the last card is Beyond the Pendulum for me. This is always going to be a flex spot that every deck can play differently. I know the YCS top 4 list was playing the rank 8. I just don't have the rank 8 come up as much as I felt Beyond the Pendulum comes up. Weirdly, this has come up to out things like a Secret Village. Your opponent will often just throw awkward things at you, and the ability for this to be a removal but also just be a spellcaster is relevant. However, do be aware, like Gilgamesh locks you to DDs, the spell to summon from deck locks you to DDs, so like you can never actually use this card once you're into your combos. However, you're never really going to be using this anyway. Like, you have access to every card in your deck if your combo is resolving, so Beyond the Pendulum's not super useful, hence the reason why it would be considered cuttable. But again, the spellcaster comes up. We have a Dark Magician play a Loza. This, yeah, super relevant in that context, and I think as we go forward, stuff like that is going to be becoming a bit more prevalent. So I feel as though this is the correct 15th card in the extra deck for this. Then of course we have a Nibiru token because we're playing Nibiru in a side deck. Again, yes, light, but you just wait. You wait. If you're, we should probably just lead off with that. So we've got 3 copies of Nibiru. This is the card that I changed into my side deck over my list at YCS. My list at YCS, I played Droplets. Given that you're a Pendulum deck, Droplets isn't really that good. You can never send your monsters off board because they don't send a grave, so you can't send them for cost. So I decided that Droplets just wasn't good enough. And Nibiru was with the amount of yummy that became more prevalent. So I was like, look, I'll put in Nibiru. It's the kind of thing that you can just hold on to, you nib your opponent. When they try and play a follow-up, you impulse them. You're not going to have a conflict if you just wait for that situation, which does come up. At the end of the day, if you Nibiru deck, it's going to need to have a follow-up to keep playing. That's when the impulse really comes in powerful, when you can just basically end your opponent's game right then and there. For the rest of the side deck, 3 copies of Perulia. Of course, it's Perulia. It's a good card to have as your extra side deck card. I am on just 1 copy of the Lava Golem. Didn't know that this was a card that other people were considering playing in this deck until, yeah, I saw the top 4 deck profile at YCS, and I was like, huh, I also played this at YCS. Did it come up? No. Has it come up since? Yes. At YCS, I never really played against anything that I was super worried about needing to Lava Golem. But subsequently, I've used this card quite a lot, so would recommend. Is more, like if you're playing more copies of Dark Spirit's Mastery, this card's just because it's searchable off that, so that's the reason why you play the Lava Golem over everything else. You typically don't always need your normal summon to do full combo as well, so you can keep that in mind. But yeah, Lava Golem, great card. Great card. Would I recommend playing more? If you can find space, probably. As for our spells now, we've got 2 copies of Thrust. This will make a hell of a lot more sense as we get to the end of the extra deck. 1 copy of Crossout Designator just comes in as a part of the 5-card going first side package that we have here. So 2 Thrust, 1 Crossout Designator. And then, firstly, a card that didn't come up as much as I thought it would, the Eradicator Epidemic Virus. I have not played against an MST deck with this deck. Post YCS and including YCS. That's the reason why this card is here. This deck has a really tough time against that matchup because everything is a continuous that remains face up on field and needs to remain face up on field. So losing die roll to MST is very rough. So Eradicate is here for the games 2 and 3. If you're going first, it's there to just try and clear out a bunch of the stuff off their hand. And then the next card is Give and Take. If you've stayed through this entire deck profile, I alluded to this earlier, this card wins me so many games. So the play effectively is you get your copy of DD Orthros. During the combo, you attach it as an Xyz, and then you clear it off the board at the end when you make the second link to go into the Markinex. This puts it in bin, then you give and take, give it to your opponent. This card is worded the same way as Gimmick Puppet. So if this summons to your opponent's board, they can just only summon Fiends for the rest of the turn. Doesn't activate, they can't droplets it, send it away. Again, it's a pendulum. So like it doesn't necessarily punish you. The only time I've had this card come back to bite me in the ass was in one of my matches at YCS. I only saw my opponent playing Elf Note. I took the gamble on them playing not the Fiendsmith version. They hand trapped me to all shit. All I had was the give and take line for the Orthros. So I went give and take Orthros, and then he turned it into Fiendsmith combo. So that was a bad idea. Something else to keep in mind, this card can be turned into Typhon, which is becoming more prevalent as people know that I'm playing this at locals now. However, like the full end board for this deck ends on so much that just a Typhon is not enough for your opponent. Like it's never going to be enough to stop you. So don't be scared about that. Don't be scared about that at all. And then to round out the extra deck, the side deck, sorry, is 3 copies of Evenly Matched. Overall, I just really like Evenly Matched for punishing Rogue. It's the reason why I decided to have that in my deck list. Yes, you can play other more unique back row removal. This card is absolutely arse going into Draco Tail branded, so do keep that in mind because they can just make the Sanctifier and put a card on your board, and then all of a sudden, congratulations, you're stuck with an Evenly Matched, at which point you need to have the droplets, which is the logic as to why I had the droplets in the deck for YCS, but ultimately just wasn't really needed. But that is the deck profile for this. If you do have anything you would suggest, do feel free to comment it down below. I hope I've given enough explanation as to my decisions behind the deck. It's 40 card list. Yes, you are playing bricks in the deck, but I just really don't like playing above 40. I've seen a lot of lists of 42. Ultimately, I felt just cutting the extra cards was a good idea to add for consistency. The bricks aren't that punishing given that you do have discard outlets. They're pendulum summonable. They're not that bad to have drawn. In fact, it often does help you play around other hand trap disruptions. If your opponent maybe tries to negate the Foolish Burial because they're worried about you getting access to the ones engraved, guess what? We can now just summon them out of hand. But yeah, as I said, that wraps up the deck profile. Comment down below if you have any questions. Do make sure to subscribe if you aren't. And yeah, have a good afternoon, everybody.